A while back, a listener wrote to me, and somewhere in the message, somewhere in passing, the way that the truest things tend to get said between friends, he told me why most watch podcasts fail him. They're trying to do too much. They're trying to basically do something that a photograph can do better, show you the dial, show you the case. There's no reason, he basically said, to talk for an hour about a thing that you could understand in a glance. I agree. And then he said the other thing, the thing that I haven't been able to put down since I read it, and the thing that made me stop what I was doing, do a ton of research for a couple of nights in a row, and then start to create music for this episode and do everything I could to try to get it out as quickly as possible. Now, he said he keeps listening to this show because he can hear what we're not saying. And I want to be honest with you because that caught me off guard. It's sort of like this inside joke that I've had with myself that someone picked up on. This show has always been built on as much omission as anything else that I actually put into words. The watches that I don't name, the stories that I sort of tell sideways, or the grails that I kind of just gesture or glance at and then quickly walk by to go talk about somebody else. Here's someone who's out there with me in the dark, reading these silences on purpose, and then hearing the shape of these things that I've started to outline. And so this one's for him, and I'll be straight up with you up front because this matters to how this show works. This episode was not my idea. The two watches that we're going to talk about today, he handed to me on a silver platter, which feels exactly right because the whole episode is about people who hear the part that isn't spoken aloud. And you've been told, and we've been told, that watch culture is about what's on your wrist. I want to spend right now with two watches that would completely and totally disagree. And I want to introduce it with some music that I made with my kids that has some German, some French, and some English in it. This is going to be a fun one. In Glashütte, the morning wakes. Welcome to a bonus episode of What's on Your Restay. I'm just Restay, So no number on this one, no season ordering or any of that kind of stuff, no running in order, just an idea that a listener put in my head that I could not let go. Two watches I could never sell you with a photo because the photo gives you the object and takes away the only thing that really matters. Two watches whose entire meaning lives in what they refuse to say out loud. One is German, one is French, and then one goes quiet kind of out of humility, and the other goes quiet because I think at the most important moment in its history, it did something that was so radical. It erased the owner entirely. To love either of them, you have to be the kind of person who is a listener of this show, the kind who can read between the lines. So let's get into this thing. Segment one, let's call the thread. Here's the thing about watch culture, the loud version of it. It's the culture of announcement. The whole machinery is built to say something about you, right? What you scored, what you waited for, what's on your wrist, right? And what that's supposed to mean about the person who's attached to it. The watch points back to its owner, essentially, and that's kind of the grammar of this hobby, and I think it's at its worst. And look at me, right? Look at what I have, and then we post it online, right? And the two watches tonight, they break that grammar completely. They both go quietly where the hobby gets super loud. But I think, and this is the part that took me a while to see, they go quiet for two different reasons, and this is why it was so hard for me to find the thread that tied these two together. It's because their threads are similar and very different. One is silent out of complete humility, and the other is silent out of solidarity. So hold on to that. We're going to come back to that, and when we do, I think you're going to see that they're pointing at the same thing but from two different angles. And this was the connection that it took me a while. My dad, when he had cancer, they did radiation therapy on tumors that were in his brain. And they came at them, they said you can't use lasers and focus them all into one location based on just if you have one laser and you're basically trying to get to a targeted location. If you use a single laser, what happens is you will burn through all of the brain tissue in your skull to get to that point. But if you use a bunch of different lasers and then all target them at one location, you can target a very specific place inside of the brain, right, without damaging all of this other tissue and skull matter and all that kind of stuff on the outside. And that's kind of what brought me to this point, was that we are we're coming to this same point, but we're coming at them from opposite ends. Segment 2, I want to talk about Mühle-Glashütte. It's Muhle, and then you know how to spell Glashütte, but just in case, it's Glashutte. The quiet one, I think, in the loud town. Let me put you in a town again. Glashütte, Saxony, population small, reputation massive, enormous. This is the most prestigious watchmaking address like in Germany, right? And the names that live there, you know them. Elanga and Zone, Glashütte Original, right? Houses that speak with like capital letters, like pedigree, restoration, like the Germans' answer to Geneva. And in some respects, the Germans step up from Geneva. So when a watch brand stands in Glashütte, the temptation is to kind of spend its whole voice on where it's standing, like to give you the location and the geography and the zip code is why they're reputable, right? And then there's Mühle, right? Muhle with two little dots over that U. Same town, founding date that beats almost everyone around it, 1869. And it spends its voice on the sea, like on rescue boats, on legibility at 3 in the morning in a storm. And it's the quiet one in this very loud town. And I don't think that's by accident. I think that's entirely their identity. It's on purpose. I could see them, having somebody come in and tell them that they had a marketing campaign and they were going to bring them up to, the 21st century and have an amazing social media campaign, and them all look at each other and go, this dude or this lady doesn't get who we are. So here's the story, because the history explains the silence. The company starts with a man named Robert Mühle, right, Muhle, who apprenticed under Moritz Grossmann, and that's a name that you should be very familiar with, and one of the founding fathers, basically, of Glashütte watchmaking. But Robert doesn't set out to make watches. In 1869, he opens a workshop making these kind of measuring instruments, very precise instruments. They're like precision gauges, and they're basically the tools that other Glashütte houses needed to build their movements accurately. And I love this detail that no one talks about. And when I found it, I was like, oh my goodness. The tools that these other watches and these other machining companies were using, they were using Robert's inventions. The great names of Glashütte, like in a real sense, were using Mühle instruments to check their own work. Mühle was the one in the back room making sure that everybody else was precise. How beautiful is that? And again, totally silent. Then the family does the least glamorous thing, but the most honest thing imaginable with that skill. They go into gauges for an industry, like speedometers and rev counters and instruments for cars. And this is a family who spent their entire inheritance, right? This idea that a measurement has to be right. Their entire lineage is about accuracy because something depends on it. Not beautiful, just right. Then the 20th century does to them what it did to everything in parts of Germany. After the war, the East folds the company into this big state combine. The nationalized Glashütte Works, right? The family name effectively disappears into a state-owned conglomerate for decades. And a man named Hans-Jürgen Müller spends those years inside that system as the sales manager responsible for all things of marine chronometers and ships' timing systems. Now remember, that was in the family before they even allowed them to put their own name back on anything. So then the walls come down, Germany reunifies, and let's jump to like 1994, and Hans-Jürgen Müller, he restarts the family company under its own name for the first time in like a generation. And not with a dress watch, not with a tourbillon to announce that Müller is back, right? He restarts it by making a marine chronometer, basically a ship's clock. The thing that he already knew, the thing that the sea actually needed. And they outfit cruise ships and whole clock systems today. The wristwatches don't even arrive until like 1996. And when they do, it's because a shipyard asked whether Müller could supply something rugged and water resistant for their crews. Like, they didn't purposefully go out and make these things as a commercial product. They made them because they were requested to make them by people who trusted their instruments. The watch was basically an answer to a question from people who work on the water, so it was never supposed to be a flex. Now, here's that watch for me, and what that means is that this is the whole brand in one objective. The SAR, the rescue timer, and again, SAR stands for search and rescue. Müller developed it hand in hand with the German Maritime Search and Rescue Service. The people who launch into the North Sea when a boat is going down. They presented the first ones in 2002, 56 watches. 56. And they've been on the wrist of those crews ever since. Now sit with that number. 56. That's not like a limited edition. They were like, oh, 56, and let's go find a number that's totally random. 56 is not a limited edition the way that the hobby uses this phrase. Why in the world would they pick 56? 56 pieces to manufacture scarcity, and goose the secondary market. That's not what it was. It was 56 because that's how many service members they needed. They needed that many watches to cover the service crew that they had. The scarcity is actually operational. Nobody was supposed to want one because they were rare, right? They were supposed to want one because if you were ever face down in cold black water at night, this is the watch on the wrist of the person that's coming to save you. Everything about the object points away from the wearer and toward the job. A soft rubber bezel, not for looks, but so it can't injure someone during a rescue. And so it survives the impact against a hull. A dial buried in superluminova because the light on a rescue cruiser's bridge are kept low at nighttime. And so you need to read the time without wrecking your night vision. Big triangular markers so your eye finds orientation instantly, the way a diver is supposed to do this. And it glows like almost nothing else. And not as a party trick, it glows because the dark it was built for is the real kind of dark. And then on the back, the one detail that tells you exactly who these people are, the movement is a workhorse. Honestly, it's a modified Solita base, and Mühle will tell you that. They don't pretend it's hot horology calibers. They fit it with their own patented regulation, and it's a feat. The Glashütte tradition has this beautiful thing called the swan neck regulator. Mühle looked at it and asked an engineer question. We love questions. Here's their engineer question. What happens to that delicate swan neck when the watch takes a hard knock against the steel hull, or it slams into the water when they jump in off of a deck 40 feet above? So they redesigned it and what they called the woodpecker neck regulation. So same idea, but it's braced so an impact can't jar it out of adjustment. So they took the prettiest and most traditional flourish in Glashütte watchmaking, but they just made it tougher because the watch was going to sea, and the sea doesn't care how pretty your regulator is. And I guarantee you the people who are actually going to be going into the water, they don't care either. What they care about is that the watch can slam into something and then keep on moving. And this is the whole philosophy in like one component. Take that heritage, keep what works, harden it for a real world, and then don't talk about it. Here's the part that should bother the hobby in like a good way. Mühle is the only watch company left in Glashütte still owned and run by the family that founded it. The only one. In the most pedigree-obsessed town in German watchmaking, the brand with arguably the most genuine local continuity is the one that talks about it the absolute least. It points down to function, to the water, to the town as a workshop instead of a brand. The SAR costs somewhere around $2,400. You will never impress anyone across a dinner table with it. And that is precisely the point. The silence is humility. It says the watch isn't about you. It's about whether it works when someone's life is the thing being measured. My listener said Mühle is underappreciated. Boy, is he right. But I'd put it sharper. Mühle isn't underappreciated by accident. It's underappreciated by design. It declined to do the things that get brand appreciation. And if you can hear that and you can see that through all of the stuff that I've been talking about in previous episodes, you can hear a brand choosing to be quiet. That doesn't make sense to most people when they live in a social media space, when everything is about search engine optimization, when everything is about clicks and streams and conversion rates. It is the exact opposite of that. And you're already the kind of listener that this show is for because you understand that. Segment 3, let's talk about LIP. LIP, the watch that erased its owner. And I literally mean lip, like the thing that's, right above your nose, right? Now we cross into France. Besançon, which I think Besançon, it's Besançon. It has a little accento, but it's underneath this C, which is a nice French word that I'm going to learn how to pronounce eventually. So we're going to move into France, and this is a brand whose silence is completely different as a completely different animal. If Mühle is the quiet brand out of humility, LIP is quiet because at the single most important moment in this brand's history, it deleted the one thing the watch culture cares about the most. It deleted the owner. But let me give you lip before that moment, okay? Because the moment only lands if you know what was at the table, okay? So lip is old. The brand is old, LIP. It goes back to 1860s, founded by Emmanuel Lippmann, and built across these generations into the largest watchmaker in France. By the mid 1950s, the factory in Besançon, I hope that's right. I'm probably butchering my French. I'm sure I'll get it right in the song. We'll see. They had around 1,500 employees and turning out, I think, hundreds of thousands of watches a year. They were not a boutique. This was a French industrial manufacturer at full scale, okay? And it has this backstory that reads like a novel, and I had such a hard time being able to truncate it into an episode that was digestible. So I have pages and pages of stuff that I couldn't get into this thing. So first, the luminous dials. The glowing radium dials, they were made for lip in 1904 by, you might know these names, right? Pierre and Marie Curie, right? Curie, right? You know, like the Curies, right? Lip watches ended up on the wrists of like Charles de Gaulle and Eisenhower and Churchill. When France wanted to give a gift, for example, that said, "This is what we make," it often said that with a gift of a lip watch. And here's the one that the kind of movement nerds might enjoy, I guess. The one my listener was kind of reaching toward is in 1954, Lip developed a diver's watch. It was on behalf of a certain Swiss house. The watch the world came to know this watch was the 50 Fathoms. And in 1958, after a long collaboration with the American firm Elgin, Lip built an electronic or an electric movement, the R27, that was widely considered better than the famous Hamilton 500. They later licensed that electric work out to brands like Waltham and Benrus. And I want to gently correct some things that people have had in the space, especially in this watch space. The more work that I did on this, the more that I even realized that I had errors and omissions in my understanding of these brands. You know, people are onto something real, and I don't want to bend the record. You know, people will say that Lip, still makes some magic in the manufacturing and the movement and that it's interesting. And I think the magic, yes, but the genuinely fascinating part in-house engineering is the historical aspect of the electric era, right? The 1958 R27 and all those years that revolved around it. The Lip you can buy new today is almost like a reissue running kind of like a running quartz watches. And they have lovely design and real history under the dial, but the deep engineering story is, I think, kind of in the past tense, unfortunately. And I say that not to take anything away from this brand. I love their watches and I love the design of Lip. I say it because people are right to kind of point at the movements. I think as they move, I think the interesting caliber is something that was in the 1950s. And so Lip has a pedigree that most brands would kill for. National stature, right? The Curie radium, the three heads of state that wore their watches, legitimate claim to electric watch history, every reason in the world to build its identity on prestige and who wears it. And then, dang it, 1973 happened. By the early 70s, the company was in trouble. Quartz was coming, ownership had passed out, the founding family, right? They'd moved on. A majority shareholder was steering toward a shutdown, and in the spring of 1973, the workers at this factory stumbled onto a document that the management had kept from them. It was a restructuring plan, and scrawled inside it the phrases that lit the fuse, a note about how many workers to get rid of. Hundreds of them marked for removal like they were some surplus inventory. The workers did something almost nobody does. They didn't just strike. Striking means that you stop, you stand outside, you wait for the owner to decide your fate. No, they occupied the factory. They took stock of finished watches, tens of thousands of them, and then they hid them. And then they made a decision I still find absolutely breathtaking. They started the assembly lines and ran the factory themselves with no owners and no boss. They made the watches, they sold the watches, and they paid themselves a wage that they voted on in daily general assembly. And they had a slogan for it. It was 3 lines. And I want you to hear it from them in French first because the rhyming is the thing. And then I'll get into the English component. C'est possible, une fabrique, un van, un souper. The best French I could do. I apologize to all of my French friends. It translates to, it's possible, we make them, we sell them, we pay ourselves. Again, we make them, we sell them, we pay ourselves. There is no they in that sentence. No owner, no shareholder, no name on the building that matters more than the hands inside it. In September of 1973, 100,000 people marched through that little city in France in the pouring rain in support of those workers. A watch factory had become the most famous labor struggle in modern French history. People who had never owned a lip and never stood and never would stood in the rain for one. Now, I'm not going to pretend it ended in a triumph. It did not. This isn't a daytime television show or a movie. That's not how things work in real life sometimes. And I want it to work out for them, and that's why part of why I'm sharing this story. The story will run on for years through a second occupation and eventually, unfortunately, a liquidation. As a business, the heroic lip lost, but that's almost the point. The thing that lip is remembered for, the thing that made it immortal, is not a reference number, it's not a complication, it's a sentence about who the watch belongs to. And I'd be cheating you if I didn't mention the other half of Lip's story, because again, it rhymes with everything else. The design, Lip worked with Roger Tallon, Tallon, one of the great industrial designers of the century. And before he ever touched a watch, Tallon designed the TGV, the high-speed train that, that aerodynamic nose you picture when you talk about like a French train. He brought the sensibility or that sensibility to the Lip Mach 2000, a bold, almost like toy-like case with a colored ball-shaped pusher set into the metal, and it looked like nothing else from the era. And so even Lip's own design language is kind of anti-prestige. It's almost like playful, democratic, industrial, made to delight an ordinary person rather than to flatter an exclusive one. And the same brand that erased the owner and the factory erased the snobbery of the dial. And that's Lip's silence. It's loud, paradoxically almost. 100,000 people in the rain is not quiet, but it's utterly silent on one subject that the hobby never seems to shut up about. It will not tell you the watch is about its owner. The most famous moment was the moment it abolished the owner and handed the watch back to the hands that actually built it. Now, segment 4, I want to talk about the two silences. So, bringing them back together the way that my listener email kind of made me want to. Mühle goes quiet out of humility. It stands in, again, the loudest town in German watchmaking and refuses to talk about prestige. It talks about the sea instead, and about a rescue crew, and about a regulator hardened, right? So that it doesn't fail. Its silence it points down to function and to place and to the job that the watch is actually designed for. And Lip goes quiet out of solidarity. It had every prestige card in the deck, right? The Curies, the three heads of state, this real electric watch history. And at that decisive moment, it threw it all out on the table and bet on the workers instead of the brand. Its silence points back to, the hands on the line, the people who actually made the thing, back and down and back, function and labor. And here's where they meet. Here's the thread my listener was tugging on, I don't think without naming it. Both of these watches locate their meaning everywhere except on the wrist of the person wearing the watch. That's why a celebrity ambassador doesn't work for these kinds of brands. A celebrity ambassador for these types of brands would do the opposite effect, in my opinion. Like the German refusal of pretension and the French refusal of the owner are the same refusal, they're just coming from different directions. Mühle says that the watch isn't about you. It's not about me. It's about the job. Lip says that the watch isn't about the owner. It's about the maker. Neither one will give you what the hobby is forever asking a watch to give. A story about how important the person wearing it is. It doesn't care. Both of these brands, very politely, but also very firmly, change that subject. And that's why you can't sell either of them in a photograph. A photo of the SAR, for example, is just a black dive watch. A photo of a Mach 2000 is just a funny-looking 70s design. The photo hands you the object and takes away the only thing that matters, the silence underneath it, the thing that is pointedly not saying anything. And you have to be told these things. You have to be the kind of person who leans in and asks what's underneath this. You have to be able to listen between the words. Now, segment 5, I want to close this out. I've been doing this show a while now, and I think my listener understood something about it, and I haven't fully said this to myself. The watches were never really the subject. The watches have been the evidence. They're what I point to while I'm talking about people, the ones who make things, the ones who refuse to scale, the ones who go quietly exactly where everyone else gets loud. And so this listener heard that in the silences, and he kind of shined a little flashlight on me and kind of exposed me a little bit. And he heard the show that lives between the episodes I actually record. And then he did the most generous thing that a listener can do. He handed me 2 watches that say it better than I'd ever imagined I could say it to myself. A quiet German tool watch and a French factory full of people who took it back in their own hands. And I'm working, I hope, that I can connect these dots the way that he was trying to draw them for me. So if you're out there tonight or today or this afternoon and you're listening to this and you're reading some stuff, look in the silences as well. Look in the quiet parts. If you heard what this episode was about before I said it out loud, this one was really yours too. Thank you for listening to the parts that I don't say. When he did have suggestions that I only spend this episode on one or the other, and I would agree that there is so much content and so much information, but once I found something that sort of to me connected them, I felt like they had to be together, and to also honor that message that I got. Okay. So let's consider this on the record now. This is the bonus, the idea that landed and came from you, the notion that the best watches are the ones pointing away from the wrist, which is an insane idea when you think about what we talk about. So do me a favor, send this to the one person you know who'd love to hear this. And that's how this show is going to continue to grow. I cannot believe we are already in about 15 countries, that we're in these top rankings already. This is ridiculous. So, well, maybe stop sending it to people because this is getting out of control. I'm just kidding. You send it to whoever you want. We're going to be fiercely independent for as long as we can. I will continue to do this for as long as I can and give you full episodes for as long as I can for free. That's my goal. I'm sure eventually my wife will try to figure out how to monetize it, and then we will have a chat and pray for me. All right, I'm Watchovski. We're something good, and thanks for reaching out on this episode. It was an absolute blast to do homework on and to write and record. In Glashütte, the morning wakes, steel on wrist and the table shakes. I trace the edge, so calm, so proud. Cold glass gleam, but the heart beats loud. Alte Linien neu gedacht, jeder Blick jetzt still bei Nacht. Wenn ich geh, dann geh ich weit mit dem Takt von deutscher Zeit. Langsam kommt die Spannung rein, jeder Klick sagt du bist mein. Schau mich an, jetzt dreht es sich, one more step and we go bliss. Watch me rise, watch me shine. Mühle on my wrist tonight. We move fast, we feel right. Lip in Besançon, hold that light. Watch me rise, watch me shine. Turn the night into daylight. Mühle on my wrist tonight. Lip in Besançon, we fly. À Besançon, les rues font vibrer, lips dans la main, je veux danser. Le métal par le verre, respirer, ton sourire me fait courir. Ich sag Bonjour mit schwerem Herz, doch dein Blick macht alles leicht. Zwischen Frankreich und Deutschland läuft mein Blut im gleichen Takt. Plus je m'approche, plus ça va, un petit feu sous mes palmes. Wenn du rufst, dann komm ich nah. We don't wait, we say voilà. Watch me rise, watch me shine. Mühle on my wrist tonight. We move fast, we feel right. Lip in Besançon, hold that light. Watch me rise, watch me shine. Turn the night into daylight. Mühle on my wrist tonight. Lip in Besançon, we fly. Take it slow, then let it go. Old world soul in a brand new glow. Berlin to Besançon, we carry time. Then we move on. Tick, 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 tick. Hands in the air. We meet. Watch me rise, watch me shine.
Lip in Besançon, we fly.